Hey, are we, are we good? Only thing on the agenda for the work session today is agenda review. So let us start with that. We will have all of the normal things, minutes of last meeting, staff reports. We have two public hearing issues. I think one of those is probably, I understand, going to get deferred. Mike, do you want to talk to us about where we are on the J-Rock thing?
Yes. So the first item number 24006 is a proposed special use permit for a country inn in the rural district, 28 plus acres, 3,000 square foot commercial kitchen, 7,000 square foot event venue, and 16 800 square foot lodging units. The Planning Commission held a public hearing at their last meeting, and we're working on some additional conditions, and they ended up continuing their public hearing to work further on those conditions. And so staff recommendation is for a deferral until we get an actual recommendation from the Planning Commission.
So I know that there were a couple of people that maybe wanted to talk about this a little bit anyway, so we can do that here in a second. Rick, I had a question for you. We got that email that I forwarded you about the form of their deferral. Was that correct, or should we reach out to Doug?
Well, they should have voted to defer, but the bottom line is we do not have a recommendation from the Planning Commission. So council has the right to postpone this, to defer action until we get a recommendation one way or the other from the Planning Commission.
My understanding too from the chair was that everybody in the room agreed to defer, but they just didn't have an official vote. That's going to be the recommendation tonight too, to defer.
I thought the motion was to continue the hearing.
They made a motion.
They did, it was voted on?
Oh.
That was not what I was under the impression, the email I got.
We got an email today from somebody that did not hear that.
Okay, so if they made a motion, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Never mind then.
Okay.
So that's where we are with the Planning Commission, and again, we'll move to defer today, but happy to talk about the project, because I know, again, some council people have some things they want to bring up, so.
All right, so Mike, I do have some questions about J-Rock project.
Mhm.
And I know that we have it down for a country inn. But after going through it and reading the codes, because I came and spoke with you last week, shouldn't that be two codes here? Because we're talking about a country inn, and when it reads and say, yeah, you should have the eating, but also the you still have the special event. I know we can combine, but I'm trying to understand, because this is the same thing he wanted last year. And reading this here, a commercial kitchen is not saying part of the country inn. So how is that?
So a country inn can have accessory uses. Dining is among them, events are among them. The Inn at Serenby has events. The bed and breakfast up on La Hacienda has events. The accessory use has to be, though, accessory to the principal use of the lodging, the country inn. And that I guess there is some level of judgment call there. What I would encourage is that you consider whether or not it fits. I mean, I think that's part of the decision you have to make, whether we add a second category, literally or formally, or not. That would take more process, meaning another application fee, more advertising, and all that sort of stuff. But what I would say is consider in your vote whether the program of activity on that site is something that you are okay approving, whether or one application or two. I think that what they propose can fit as accessory use. That's certainly staff's opinion or a position on the question. It could be possible that it could be operated in a way where it got upside down and the accessory use was more prominent than the principal use. That would be a code enforcement issue in that case. I would say though, based on what's been proposed, if you wouldn't approve it as two separate permits, or if you would approve it as two separate permits, go ahead and approve it as the single use as proposed, right? Because we can condition, we can condition it to any scale as appropriate. So if you think the size of the event venue is too big, we can condition it down. You can create the situation where it fits what you feel is okay for the property.
It's just concerning because it seemed like it's two different codes. And I know that the event center had more of like a 200 buffer. And so that's just like with the with the country inn, you don't have to have any like buffer. And you can actually put a country inn on 1 acreage. Some of the residents, one of the residents who bought the property, which bought more acreage to make sure that they fit into our zoning with the 20 acres with the per house.
Mhm.
It's just not fair that, we allowing this, for him.
So I think that hold on, let me take a look at the site. Oh,
Ruby, that is though, right? One of the things that the council should be looking at is they're making their decision, whether they think it fits
that's
the way that it's been described, right?
absolutely.
I mean, Serenbe is obviously an inn. They happen to host weddings, but the hotel rooms are booked most nights, whether or not there's a wedding going on.
Right.
That's not the way he's explained it oftentimes. But I mean, I think too, that, as he's been trying to work his way through this, he's kind of shifted what his thinking is about what he's going to do, but that's council's decision whether or not that makes sense.
Right.
That's right.
And I know Serenbe, you think about a lot of that started up under Fulton County before we're talking about Chattahoochee Hills now, and this
Right.
zoning and what is fair to the residents
Mhm.
and everything. So we, the citizen, when they came in and bought their property, because there was 3 people during that time bought property. And they was thinking, okay, I had to buy more because of the 20 acres, but then you can let someone come and just put a 28 acres and put a country in and all this stuff on there in their back door. It actually sits in the back middle of that door. And it's a shared lake. So we should not put that responsibility on the other citizen because it's a shared lake. Something happened, should he have to do something different? No. So that's all I have to say about it.
Okay, if I may address just the question about the buffers, I hadn't reviewed the code on special event venues, so if that's 200 feet. Their site plan does show the event venue buildings well over 200 feet away from the property line. So I don't know that they were trying to get away with something like that by just changing the
That's something too that you
proposal.
could condition, right? You could make
Sure,
sure. the condition
absolutely,
didn't allow you to get
absolutely,
closer.
right.
Again, those are the different possibilities, right? You can just say yes, you can just say no, or you can say yes, but you have to do all these things, right? So the
Mhm.
council has that right.
I got one question. I noticed in the planning commission, there was speak that a special use permit can expire.
Mhm.
Is that with acquisition? Is that when they sell the property? Or is that a time limit or an ownership limit?
So it can be either there is an expiration date on special use permits if nothing happens. So if they don't pull any permits, it should have had it with me. I think it's 24 months. If they don't get building permits or land disturbance permits in that time period, city council can also impose a time limit also, and that's explicitly listed in.
Would that, like if it was approved and then there was a ton of complaints, we realized things weren't like they should be. Can you or can you not reverse that?
You can
Did that
condition
permit
it with
expire?
the time limit and then it would have to be renewed. That's one of the things you could do.
So if I'm the landowner and I invest millions of dollars in this event,
Mhm.
it's a possibility that would be not usable.
So if that were a condition, I would suggest so if that were a condition, they would not be able to get financing for the project.
Because that would. Okay, I just want to make that
Mhm, mhm.
understood.
Speaking of Rodney and I, of course, spent last weekend, part of the week going to our training for new city council members, and there was an excellent exposition by a planner for Madison, Ms. Callahan, who stressed that one of the things that we have to consider is predictability. Zoning is about predictability and also profitability to protect property values. And she stressed this twice in her exposition. I wonder how we, given the repeated concerns of neighbors to this project by Mr. Robinson, their worry about their property values being affected. How do we begin to assess that in our decision making?
And we have at least 3 pages of people opposed of it, this project as well.
You know, I'll say this, I think a lot of it, a lot of this stuff that does come forward, it actually, you know, it does fit. Does fit. But you know, that's something I think we've talked about for years is where do you draw that line between where people live and where business is? We don't have that line. We got a 500-foot buffer for whatever you want to build. So, I mean, you're gonna, I mean, if it fits, can we deny them? Not get sued?
You can
The
because,
answer.
again, you
So
know.
the answer is yes.
You can.
So there's
Yeah.
really no clear line for like me, if I came in here to do something. I mean, it's just, now it truly is up to the council. So really the zoning doesn't matter to a certain extent.
That's not true.
No,
No,
Everything.
the
Okay.
zoning sets the parameters. It matters a lot, but.
no,
the-
I mean,
you're-
I
you're-
understand that. What I'm saying is just like what Ruby's saying, it's the difference between, you know, these people moved there for peace and quiet and all this, had no idea this could be a possibility in their backyard. You know, we're going to continually answer that question. unless
Although-
there's a line somewhere.
So 2 things too to keep in mind, right? We also have people come in here regularly saying, well, if I can't do a hamlet, then I can't do anything on my property. And that's not true either, because we have all these other possibilities, things that can happen. And we decided during the comp plan process with, you know, hundreds of people from the community in the area were appropriate in rural conditions. And, you know, what you come to find as you do this thing longer and longer is that people are happy to have conversations about hypotheticals. Like, yeah, wouldn't it be great if we had a microbrewery somewhere in the city? Wouldn't it be great if we had whatever somewhere in the city? Until somebody talks about doing it next door to them. And then suddenly it's not such a great idea. And what the council also has to do is they have to look at this from a citywide perspective, right? There will always be 1 or 2 people that are unhappy about something happening, but it may be good for the city, or it may not be. And your decision is based on both of those things, right? It should be based on both of those things. Is it good for the city as a whole? And does it not have too big of a negative impact on people next door, right? Now, I'll tell you too, property values are an interesting thing. People complain about Serenbe, and yet property values are highest next to Serenbe. So a lot of times these things don't create the negative impact on property values that people think they might, because people moving in that are buying properties actually want to be next to those activities, right? So that's not the metric as much either. It's predictability. I get that, right? For sure. Our zoning has allowed these sorts of things for 20 years. And then it's impact too, right? Does this have a more negative impact than you should? For example, a shared pond, right, is something that is a big deal,
Yeah.
right? Just as an example. So the council's job is not an easy one, right? It's weighing those things. Bigger picture, and then also local impact. And yeah, to your point, right? The council's always going to be making the final call on that. Because
When
it's
I
never
get it,
going
I
to be
just,
cut
you
and
know,
dry.
we've received letters in the back of stuff before, you know. if you
For sure.
deny me, we'll sue you.
For sure.
You
Well,
know,
and-
find
and-
out for
and
sure where that
implicit-
line is.
Implicit in all that's been said here too is that just because somebody meets the standards for their piece of property, they have the right to the zoning they bought it with. And they don't have a right to do whatever they can
sure.
figure out that
Correct.
fits. There's been an illusion in this city that that's the case. It's not the case.
There's
And-
no illusion.
And so
We've
It's
had
been
these
ex-
conversations before.
it's been expressed to me
Yeah,
enough
okay.
times that I'm gonna say it's
All right.
a
For some people.
prevailing attitude.
Agree.
But this idea of managing, I'm speaking into it.
Daryl was telling me. It's for the
Okay.
folks at
Okay.
home. That's all, sorry.
That's all, yeah,
He
right.
was
Got
telling
it.
me too.
And so, so, and I think that probably, I mean, we could probably get a reading on the history of this idea of being sued and who wins and why. Might be illuminating. Anyway,
Well, you know,
What?
your point to, you buy the property with the zoning in place. That's, the rest of it is the discretion of, does it fit or does it not fit? It's not, it's in the, and not, because we were on the planning commission and we had that class. You know, you make sure that the i's are dotted, the t's are crossed. There's so many other things to consider. It's not just, but you don't have a right to that. That's why it's not, you don't have a right for a special use permit. You don't have that right. That's why all this special review is here, is in place to consider the neighbors, the impact, the countless things there are to consider with the lake, with the, whatever. With the lake and, all the other things we talked about, I can't remember right now, but there's a lot to consider. And it is a hard decision.
And we've all sat here, I mean, again, maybe the people that have been here for the last few years haven't, but we've all sat here and also had people complain about what they couldn't do on their land, right? So this balance, it is a balancing act. And, you know, there are places where things might be more appropriate than others, and that's just the job of this group.
It's hard.
And yeah, and one of the comments I was gonna make, just so I get that big macro issue. But with this particular project, when I listened to the planning commission and then I've read the letters the citizens have sent in, and basically stating kind of the impact that I think there are about 14 home sites, either with residents. Now I feel like I'm echoing. Am I echoing?
Kind of hard.
It's okay.
I hear you.
Huh. With where am I at? Okay, so with the residents, and some of those are vacant lots, but maybe one or two. So one of the things I did is I looked through these conditions, because there's like 18 that we got. I know that's being reviewed from the planning commission meeting, and I listened to their meeting too. And also made some comments of my own. I mean, just under the context of the fact that for this review, what we've heard, I had some suggestions, just kind of that may address some of what I saw in letters about noise and things like that, that I think some of these conditions have addressed. Of course, not everything, just with the nature of the property and its setting, but with potentially some of the sound and people and numbers of people. And I didn't know if we're going to go through anything, but if I could just make a few comments.
Sure.
Does that make?
Yeah, no, it's good to get it on the record, because the
Yeah.
point is too, the things that are brought up, anything that's brought up that's new today, Mike can feed back to the planning commission too, as they're looking at this, right? So it's a perfect.
So however the
complement.
vote goes, but I figured it might as well also talk about some of these thoughts that I've had personally, looking at all of that. So I have the conditions here. I mean, my first thing, I think what Doug, and Christine spoke about was limiting it from 250 guests to 150.
So that was something that part of the applicant's team spoke about. Actually, the architect, I think, was looking at square footages and how they were thinking about designing the building, and throughout the 150 guest number. And that was one of the things that we talked about in the planning commission, making a change to. We since heard from the applicant himself, that he really wanted the 250 number. And so that's still what he's looking for, and that'll be
Right.
something to consider.
Okay. Because I mean, I would think I would be more inclined for the 150 versus 250. It just seems like a large number for that property in general. And he's also limiting himself to wedding celebrations and and there's a lot of other things that could go on. There's a lot of other kind of events. You could have, I don't know, graduations and all. So it seems like as far as what types of events, he's limited himself to weddings and wedding rehearsal dinners.
Mhm.
I didn't see anything else unless I'm missing something.
That's right. So it's the wedding events, which in my mind could include rehearsal dinner, wedding, the wedding itself, and then reception. There might be something else related, but something
Okay.
pretty much
So it's
limited
not
to those
like
things.
corporate events or
Not-
graduations or
Right, none of
whatever.
that. He does also, though, have the private dining, which is smaller numbers, limited to a much
50,
smaller
it
number,
said.
but there are also private dining events.
Excuse me. Do they have sewer over there?
No.
No.
So how is that gonna work with that many people?
I'm sorry.
The-
Oh, sewer,
septic
yeah, we would
system.
have septic.
Okay.
Yeah, the health department will say what that needs to be. So he'll have to meet their requirements.
Because in our neighborhood, they tried to put in a halfway house, and that's what actually killed it.
Because they didn't have room on their lot for the septic.
No, it was the lake, the septic and the amount
right,
of people.
right.
I mean, Bill Edwards, I mean, he was, that's what it amounted to. So I would be interested to see that first before I even vote, because that would be I mean,
That's-
that many people I'm looking at and I'm thinking, they were complaining about 30 or 40. I mean, you're talking 150 a night. If they went with Camille's number. I don't know where all that crap's gonna go. I mean, I just see it as a
Yeah,
wasted
right.
conversation till I see that, because I've seen that
Right,
destroy ideas before.
That's usually those more technical answers usually come later in the process. It'll come with the engineering. If you condition them to 150 or 250 and the health department says, sorry, we can't, you can't perk for more than, 100 people, then they'll be limited to a lower number. They do have 28 acres. It seems unlikely, but it's not impossible. There are engineering solutions to septic, but
No,
I mean, they're close enough to where the development that's across the street that's happening, that's gonna have a lift station,
right.
that they could run the sewer pipe to that.
Yeah, that's
I mean, that would be an expensive backup plan for something like that. Although that's also the kind of thing that then may make this financially not viable. Right, it's one of the reasons why you put limits on these things too, time wise, right? Like, if they can't get their stuff together to make it happen, even if you did it with all the conditions in some time period, you just revert it, doesn't.
And that pond is an interesting issue, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because the property line runs right down the middle. So in my mind, they should be limited to shoreline activities only. Because suddenly you're like, oh, turn around. I mean,
Rick, how does liability for something like that work? If you've got a pond that's split among three owners and you look at them as a commercial use, and someone gets in from the commercial site and paddles over and drowns on my private property, what's the liability risk to the private property owner? Because two of the private property owners have brought up that concern.
Well, I would be surprised that liability would attach to the two residential owners of the lake. But,
Yeah,
it's
America, right?
It's America. But most likely it would be all in the commercial. And again, how do they drown? What happened? Did the boat tip over? Did they not have the right safety gear on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? But it is a risk. If I were one of the residential owners, I'd want to know what in the world I need to do to protect myself.
Well, can we condition an indemnification?
Well, could do that, but it could also do what Camille is talking about. You don't allow them on the lake.
Well, but it'll still happen. That's the problem.
I mean, you
right?
can't stop that. That's the thing.
People do
Well,
things they're not
if-
supposed to do.
If they cross the line and it's illegal, then it's their fault.
Oh, well,
Then
okay,
Then it's
I'm
trespass.
not worried about
that's fine. All right.
it. Break the law and you get hurt.
Well, you
I
know, the
would-
way it works with swimming pools, if you,
Mhm.
Yeah, but there's not a
Come in
law.
my
against
yard.
pool.
and drown in my pool, that's on me.
No,
If
it's
you come-
not.
If you come in
Not-
my yard
not-
and climb over my fence, then it's
You-
on you.
There you go.
That's right.
If you have the fence, you comply
Mhm.
to the ordinances for safety
That's still
fence and
funny, you're
whatnot that's
trespassing and you
required.
drowned it, now I
Right.
gotta deal with it.
And even a small child, again, if you have the required fencing around your pool, you as the homeowner of that pool, you're not, while you might feel horrible, you're not responsible. If you
Correct.
don't have the fence or the gate's not working or whatever, then you got liability. Here it's a different story. I mean, you don't have a fence, I mean, you just have an open lake. Again, I would think the law would be that the residential owner didn't have anything to do with it, wasn't their activity, et cetera, et cetera. The law is not going to be in favor of the
I get it.
residential owner being responsible, but I can't say that for 100% certain.
Conditioning and indemnification would be a good thing for those
Right,
people.
indemnification would help.
Because the fact is, even if we forbid it, the event owner could say, well, the city doesn't allow us to do this, but yeah, you guys go ahead and go swimming, right? Like, just an indemnification takes that risk away from the other homeowners.
And all your neighbors are worried about everything that's going on. They think it's just gonna be a disruption.
Right.
Pretty
And it's
much.
gonna be confusion. You talk, even if I was a lake owner and someone's had something like, how would you feel? You have to ask the question.
You ain't
gotta
gotta
ask the
convince me. I've always, I understand the citizens moved out here for a reason. That lady was perfectly clear. She,
Right.
And I get that.
well, it could, yeah, no, I've got so many little details, but I won't even go through them all. But like, even in this case, so there's 16 home or cabins, 800 square foot cabins. And because it's a country inn, so that's no kitchen in those, right? It's just like
Place to
for
sleep.
two people, sort of like,
800
We're
square
not-
feet.
Cause
They
it-
could
we-
have
That can be a
kitchens,
small
have
house,
kitchens.
800 square feet. It'd be a
I mean,
So
there-
we
there are
start turning
kitchens
it
in some
into
of the
almost like-
cabins At the condominiums too. I mean, that's, hotels have kitchenettes sometimes in them.
right, a hotel, but when I'm thinking, okay, yeah,
Country Inn,
a country
we
inn,
don't restrict that.
we don't restrict like cooking. I'm just trying to think, it sort of starts borderlining on Airbnb almost.
It's not that different.
Yeah. Because if you're tying it into having the kitchen and serving the guests, and then are you really, I don't know. It's kind of fuzzy.
Well, that will definitely add some cars there. I'll add a little traffic there. How
Well,
often is
the-
your plan on being open?
Where are they on the parking, which came up last
Yeah.
time in zoning? The parking for the number of people?
Yeah, there's nothing here about kitchens in the units. There, we have that language somewhere and I would have to figure out where it is. Parking. I received today from the applicant a revised site plan. Actually, it looks almost exactly like, and I'm happy to pass them out. It has a fence, which we would need to talk about, and it has more parking. What they're showing is 115 parking spaces. Actually, we have parking maximums that with the square footage that they've shown would allow 114 spaces. So one less than here. There are also a couple little buildings that aren't in their schedule of buildings that we've added up together. Their storage, I was told, and so if we added those in, maybe 115 spaces. But so what they're showing now is basically the maximum that they would be allowed.
How many people is he gonna be able to feed every night? Or is it down in the hall?
So he would be allowed for the private dining events up to 50 by condition. So that number can be changed in the conditions. Weddings, of course, have their own number we just talked about. And then other than that, the only people he's allowed to feed are the people who are staying there overnight.
Okay, so it's not like all these things are full and then we got an open restaurant going too.
Right, that's correct. We've conditioned him. He doesn't have an open restaurant with, regular
Only
restaurant
servicing
kind of
who's in the
hours.
cabins.
That's right. That's right.
So we're not in and out, they're staying. a few
That's right.
days.
That's right.
The other thing, Camille, you mentioned before that hadn't really struck me was the idea of, the lights and the parking and all of that, right? Like the idea of buffering the parking in a way so that if people are pulling in with their lights on or whatever, it's not shining across the lake into people's, again, I don't know where they're laid out.
Some Greystone street lamps or something.
Yeah, well, the fencing may actually help with that if it's around the parking, right? With just
So, you know
light
what?
glare everywhere. And
There
then,
you go.
So we have.
He's teasing this, Kevin, he's teasing us.
Planning commission that, new
Thank you,
materials
Mike.
be presented unless you ask for them. I'm assuming that.
I want to, it'd be interesting to see the,
Basically the same site plan that you have in your packet, but it does include, like I say, additional parking. Whoa, really?
your, yeah,
Thank you.
Who are you again?
Anybody else?
Anyone?
They focused on all the wrong things there.
Excuse me. So I'll point out a couple of things that the only things that are different, again, so parking, you can see it's now between the two parking lots, 115 spaces, 85 up by the most of the activity, and then another 30 closer to the road. And then they're also showing a privacy fence protecting all the properties on the Wilkerson Mill Road side. Now, we have in our fence regulations, you're not allowed to put a privacy fence in the first layer, which is what this is. So we would have to specifically approve, I guess, a variance, Rick, or would we be able to do it by conditions? If we wrote a condition, they had to put a privacy fence up there, but we don't allow privacy fences there. Do we have to go through the formal process of a variance?
I think you can make it part of the special use permit.
Okay, so we would want to write that condition, make sure
The
it's
fence will
specifically.
come all the way to the road.
Yeah,
Right
so
up to it, so we can
it's-
see it
it's-
from the road.
it's maybe a little difficult to see. It's everything from here forward. So it doesn't line the road in front.
Yeah, no, I see it. I'm
But
just
it-
saying, I just wonder if I drive by, I'm gonna see this hideous
you
fence.
are.
I'd rather see the pine trees.
Exactly.
Right, so it doesn't, you would just see, it would go along the edges and certainly, I mean, this is something they've offered based on, in response to what they heard at the planning commission. If council would prefer something different, that's certainly something. to
I
do.
can understand the ones that are dividing the property, but in front of the roadway, I'd see
Right.
no reason for that whatsoever.
So, yeah, so the fence doesn't go in front of the road, it just goes along the road. So it basically it's protecting those neighboring property owners.
Yeah.
Right.
It may help
Things
with
that wasn't-
headlights as people come and go from,
The fence is
in that,
just
because
here.
that's the entrance, that's the,
Right,
yeah,
right. So it would help, help protect
on
against
the
headlight
neighboring
shining.
properties, yeah, for shining at night.
Oh, shit. All right, good job, Mike. Appreciate that. And these things ain't.
Sorry, we,
So
crisis averted.
Yeah, we're good now.
one of the things the planning commission was discussing was fencing for the neighbors. It came up in the idea of a sound barrier. Actually, it was somebody from the applicant's team actually who first mentioned it. Sound barrier or just to keep people off the property. There's some question about where that would go. Would it be at the property line, interior to the property line? Would it be a solid sound barrier? Or would it be more of just a barrier just to let people know they're at the edge of the property? I suggested that maybe they only be required to do it if the neighbor asks, because the neighbor might prefer not to have something there, right? Visually have to look at this, whatever the barrier is, whether it's a fence or so. So that's still part of what's under discussion in the planning commission is do we need to require some sort of barrier to protect the other property owners? Again, they responded for these front property owners. Is there anything else that might need to be done? And I don't know where they're going to land on that because it wasn't clear by the end of the conversation. Of course, they put it off to another meeting, but it wasn't clear at the end of the conversation if it was about sound or visual or trespass, right? Which those mean three different things.
Could mean three different solutions, yeah.
That's about a mile of fence around the whole property.
It would be a lot of fence. It would be very expensive, yes.
Well, and again, if the idea is you're wanting people not to be straying, you don't need privacy fence. You could put,
Cattle fence.
just,
fence.
some
Some
barbed wire, yeah.
Yeah.
If it's about trespass and not visual, I would suggest some simple wooden board fence as interior to the property as you can get it, not out of the property line,
Yeah.
but so it's exterior to whatever activity. If you have a path, it's exterior to the path, wherever the limits of that activity are. But you don't really want them clearing more trees than
Right.
necessary, right? And the neighbor might not want them clearing more trees. And anyway,
Does this include a tree plan at all? I didn't see much, as far as not removing for visual and.
so those buffers that they're showing, the 124 feet on the one side and 120 on the other, those are intended to be undisturbed. Although we have written something in the conditions where if they wanted to put a path in there, they could do it with minimal clearing to allow the path. Anywhere there's a path, they're supposed to mark that, basically where the edges are, don't go that way. And the fence would accomplish that if there were to be a fence.
And the way that that's maintained is just covered under the zoning in the buffer language, right?
So Mike, even with, you talk about now with more cars, they got 115 space. I do see that for us the safety traffic, especially coming off of Cascade Palmetto Highway and Wilkinson Mill Road. There's just so many accidents there. Just the week of February 22nd, that was like 2 accidents in that same week. And we have a lot of seniors that is in that community. And down Petersburg Road, a lot of the seniors walk because there's nowhere here in Chattahoochee Hills to walk. They utilize that space. I just feel that the safety and the welfare of that community to have this event center, it's just not good for the community. And that's just my personal feeling.
Yeah, I do understand that corner. Is it the worst corner in the city? No, not the worst, apparently not,
But it's a
but it's a bad one. Yeah. Okay.
Ruby, you said you have, I guess, signatures of folks who don't want it? Is that
Yes,
what it
and you
is?
should have gotten a copy.
Definitely.
Ms. Gloria Edwards sent that about 2 weeks ago. Everybody should have gotten a copy, an email of that. If not, I can send it back to you.
Well, I just did get my Greystone hooked up yesterday.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
I'm sorry.
It's beautiful.
I don't have it printed out
Congratulations.
with me, but yeah.
No,
we
no, you're
do.
fine. I mean, what was it? Just people just, how many numbers?
It was about, I want to say at least 20 per page or so. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So what about the neighbors that are there?
they opposed that. We actually have one in the, I know she can't talk tonight.
I know
But
that.
the original when, the 3 owners that bought this property from Miss Mary is here,
Mhm.
and her sister. And this is what I was told. I wasn't there at the table. That when they sold the property, they wanted to sell it so it'd be homes, because she still lived there and it would affect her. Okay, and so Miss Lenore, which is the person that has the house on the right-hand side, and Miss Mary is the house on the other side. These are
Mhm.
seniors, which are 60 years old. So the Gosby, they also bought 3 different parcels. One is like 18, one is 14, and one is 68,
Mhm.
so that they could bring their family out here. I'm assuming Justin, they was all told the same thing at the table that, to keep this as homes. But
Yeah.
I guess he had some other. than
Yeah, when he
defined.
bought it, he decided to do what he wanted. Now he owns it. He can,
I mean, yeah, that's true, but I'm just saying.
no, yeah, I
So
hear you.
the thing that was at the table, and that's what the family thought that they was doing when they were selling the property to
Yeah.
people that they could trust.
Yeah.
Any other things that we want to transmit to the planning commission? Camille, did you have more, or do you want to tell Mike if you got a couple other ones?
Yeah, I can. I'll tell Mike.
I just,
You know,
again, we'll get their feedback probably for next month's meeting, and we can have this conversation in its fullness before a vote.
I think there's a little more we could do as far as noise and lighting. Just from the conditions I read, just to have less impact on neighbors.
All right. Next thing is 24-07, which is the rezoning back to RL of the property on Campbell and Redwine. Anything in particular we need to? I mean, that's the.
No, I think
the
everyone's
landowner.
familiar with this. The studio property, the special use permits expired. The ordinance would revert the zoning back to what it was before 2022 when we got the application and eliminate the 3 variances that were attached to the rezoning. So it'd be back, everything would be back the way it was.
One
Easy.
after that is 23-044, which is the Merrill property rezoning. We're gonna ask to defer that again today. We were in a meeting last week, kind of trying to hammer out some of the last details on the development agreement. And again, that's partly because that agreement is something that the form of which was just created. So we're hammering out all those details that will then help us going forward as well. But we also brought up a couple of issues, some things that I'd heard from council, just some other things that have come up through other channels. And, we're going to be talking about those between now and then also as we work through this. Just a couple things, for example. One of the things that has always been part of the conversation is that they don't want to talk about, the Palmetto stuff that's been long zoned in relation to our project, but our zoning requires that any development look at how it connects to developments next to it, right? And that's something that we always talk about. When Serenbe comes into something, how does it all connect together? And so we have to talk about that in the context of, the development that's right next door that they also own. And, let them know that they just needed to show us how that's gonna work. And also, as a part of that, by the way, you're showing a bunch of stuff on that Palmetto development that you don't want to talk about that connects to our gravel roads. And our gravel roads that we don't allow to be paved ever can't possibly handle the kind of traffic that you're talking about putting on them here. And in fact, we'd probably close them before we let traffic like that happen, but dead end them in the city. So again, that conversation has to be had at some level and just letting them know that we have to have that conversation at some level. Also, the trail connectivity, because our zoning does have the requirement that trail connectivity is something that developments let come through. And, we have the underpass that goes to Copper Mill Park there, and the trail always was meant to go through that area and through the Palmetto development. And that it's not just good enough to say, yes, we're going to connect through the stuff here. We also want to hear how it's going to get through the Palmetto side and connect to the greater thing. And what was the other, Mark? There were 4. What was the other one? I'm forgetting. Can't remember what the other one was.
The connectivity of the 4.
Oh, the 4,
quadrants.
yeah. So in the way that we talked about this a little bit, right? The original plan had more of a one-piece hamlet or village where it was all connected. And it did require a buffer variance on the parkway to make that work, but it also meant that the whole thing then was a unit and was walkable and all of that. And when, basically in response to another council person who isn't in the council anymore, that kind of was changed. We've now ended up with something that is 4 distributed pieces that don't really connect with each other and don't really communicate with each other, which is not really the way our zoning is supposed to work. And so, you know, I don't know what the right answer for them is, and I didn't tell them what the right answer was, but the plan that they've got does not make sense in the context of our zoning. And I know there's been some pushback from council on some of the stuff that's happening closer to the park, right? I mean, this thing would make more sense if it was all in one unit on the other side of the parkway where the most of their property is. And, you know, if that means that we need that buffer variance, then, I mean, it makes it work far better in our context to have that buffer variance not there. But whatever, like, we need to have that conversation, and I've just put that out in front of them again. Good.
The other thing that had come up was the concept plan, the sufficiency of the concept plan, and then the idea that was mentioned in the ARC memo on the DRI about the mix of uses and how they support the traffic numbers.
Because that was part of the thing too, right? Like the way that this works and the implications of traffic on the DRI are based on the village concept, where there aren't distributed nodes that you have to get your car drive between, but it's one piece that you can walk around in, and that supports the lower traffic numbers that then support the traffic impact stuff. Well, that doesn't work the way they've got it laid out now.
Would that mean the development, one of my concerns is, once you give away those buffers, you cannot take them back ever. We don't have to give them away. We could give them away at a later time. But once you give them away, they're done. But does that mean the park close on the north side, is that still going to be developed to a lesser extent or none at all?
Well, that's the question, the
Or
open
would it
question.
all be on one side? Now, that's totally different scenario,
It would make much more sense in our
There's a bit of-
context for it all to be on one side.
all on
Right.
one side versus.
And also communicating with the piece that's in Palmetto, which has no buffers, right? That was the original conversation we were having.
That's
Was, you know, we've got this section right next to Palmetto with no buffers. And to pretend that somehow we're gonna have this country feel in that little chunk between no buffers and the parkway is silly, frankly. And, you know, again, for us in our village concept, to have a more compact village works better without those buffers in that section, right?
On that one.
So, I mean, again, we put that all back in front of them. Like, look, you know, we need to address these issues, and again, different council, so we need to have that conversation with the current council that's actually voting on this, and they're getting ready for that. And that's it, and in the meantime, there's nothing to vote on, so we're gonna defer.
Just a sort of a related question, since you brought up the gravel roads, have we explored how to condition access to the gravel roads in such a way that it doesn't get end run at the state level by declaring it, you know, public safety issue, therefore we've got to pave the
Well,
roads?
I mean, it would be something that I would want to put in something like a development agreement, right? I mean, that's a detail that we can put in the development agreement, where if every party's agreeing to it up front, then they don't have that recourse. That's really the only way you can do it. Now, the state can still override you, right? State can come in and make whatever decision they want on our
Right, but they'd
roads.
have no reason to if it's conditioned.
That's right.
Of course.
That's right. That's right.
And
That's the goal, right? Is to have a common understanding there that's then conditioned and agreed. Anyway, we'll be talking more about that as those changes are done and come through. 24-015, that revision to the alcohol ordinance. Dana or Rick?
Last month, there was a discussion about whether or not the ice cream shop could be allowed to serve alcohol there, or have it, I guess, a
Champagne floats.
Bailey's on top of your ice cream or whatever.
Yeah.
So we had to change the ordinance in order for that to occur, and that's what I did. I just broadened the definition of restaurant to include food, other food items and dessert items and whatnot. So that's what's here in front of you.
We talked about this a little bit last time. Is there anything else that anybody,
Ice cream and booze. Why not?
that's only gonna exist in the place that we allow the stuff to exist in the first place, right?
Right, but if you think about like Cafe Intermezzo downtown where they have dessert and they'll have like after dinner drinks or whatever, I mean, you could have something like that.
Yeah.
Because I, first was trying to think, do I put Bailey's on vanilla or chocolate? But, yes.
Any questions about that? All right, the next one is 24-016, and this has been this conversation that we previewed a little bit last time. Kevin, you want to talk about it?
Sure.
It's a fairly significant change in the way that we handle vehicles.
Good afternoon. I have with me Ray Simpson, excuse me, from Enterprise. Basically what this is I've been working with Ray for 5 months now, 4 or 5 months, yeah, about transferring all of our fleet services over to Enterprise so that we no longer are purchasing vehicles. We're now going to be leasing them. And before you all, I had the same thoughts. I had the same, because I'm not for leasing vehicles at all. However, that's not what this program is. I have reached out to other chiefs who have done this program, and they say that this is such a great money saver for the city. The city manager has reached out to other city managers saying the same thing. Our finance director has done the same thing. So has our fire chief, and everyone that we have talked to has said that this program saves the city, their city, so much money that they wish they were doing this sooner. So I'll turn it over to Ray so that he can give you a brief synopsis of what we're going to do and the program, and go from there.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Ray Simpson. I'm a senior account executive with Enterprise Fleet Management. Let me start by saying thank you for having me here tonight and give me an opportunity to speak to you all and present and review the program for consideration and potential partnership as well. So just a little bit quick history on the program, maybe before that, or my company itself. Most folks are probably familiar with Enterprise, the rent-a-car company out there. We're on most street corners and every major airport in the country. Some things folks don't know about us is that we operate the largest private fleet in the entire world at over 2.1 million vehicles. So who I work for is a division of that large rent-a-car company. I work in our fleet management sector. My responsibility is to create new business partnerships amongst commercial and government agencies. So within the state of Georgia, for example, and I'm sorry, are we connected, able to share here at all?
Let you do your introduction.
Okay, go ahead. You got to bring it up to support me here. Thank you, sir. Going to put the city manager to work for me for a minute. I'm going to enjoy this. Good man. So a little, like I said, Enterprise itself, I told you a little bit about the company itself, 2.1 million vehicles, largest private fleet in the world. From a fleet management standpoint, within the state of Georgia, we have about 450 different customers whose fleets we're operating for them. I primarily do probably 70% commercial, working with construction and construction trade companies. And then about 30% I work with government agencies. We work with both counties and cities. If you could move forward, maybe slide 3, please. There we go. This is Enterprise. This one will work right here. You can go back forward. We're going to be dancing here for minutes. Okay. Oh, it's up here. Okay, thank you so much. I'm looking up here. All right, good deal. So like I said, we work with commercial companies and also government agencies as well. Within the state right now, we work with about 25% of all counties operating their fleet of vehicles, both in the white fleet, meaning public works, non-emergency response vehicles, along with sheriff's offices as well. And then from a city standpoint, we work with approximately 200 cities throughout the state of Georgia currently. It's probably just slightly under that number today. I've created a number of those partnerships myself, cities such as, and if you can move forward here, one more slide, please. Actually, one more after that. There we go. It's a small sample of some of the folks we work with, but you can see City of Grantville is not too far from here. City of Roswell is a partnership I stood up about 6-7 years ago now. They have approximately 400-500 vehicles with us, both public works and the police force as well. Savannah, Tybee Island, Covington, City of Hartwell, Oakwood, just some names. Covington, as I say, Covington's up there. But so what we do with these folks is, and what we see when we partner with most government agencies is that these agencies, when they acquire a vehicle, they run these vehicles until the wheels fall off, right? They tape the wheels back on and keep operating them, believing that they're being good stewards of the citizens' money out there. And what we found from operating our own 2.1 million vehicle fleet is that there becomes a point in which it's counterproductive to operate a vehicle. And what I mean by that is, well, number one, the value of the vehicle is not worth much at all at the end of, say, its life, right? If you're going to dispose of a vehicle from most cities that I see, they're selling the vehicles on gov deals for maybe $500 to $1,000. Well, at a term, 12, 15 years old with 200,000 miles on them or so. But along with that lack of value of the vehicle itself, you have increased operational costs. The cost of fuel and the cost of maintenance on these vehicles exceeds what it would cost you to operate a new vehicle, right? So what we do with our own vehicle, our own fleet, is we identify proper hold periods for vehicles. So if you can move forward there, please. Next slide. There we go. So this represents the concept that I'm talking about here. Each vehicle has what we call a useful life, right? Like I said, a point in which it becomes counterproductive to operate that vehicle. We help our city partners identify what that period is. Now, that's based upon a number of factors. Number one, what the vehicle is itself. Emergency response vehicle has a different hold period than, say, a public works vehicle, right? The number of miles traveling on that vehicle's traveling, I should say, impacts the hold period or how long you should run it. And then what's upfit on it as well. An F-150 regular cab pickup truck can be replaced a lot more often than, say, an F-250 with $12,000 service, a utility body on the back of it. You're going to run those a little bit longer. And the same concept with law enforcement vehicles. So that's the overall concept. Now, you would think that this program would maybe cost a lot, be a luxury, right? But it actually becomes a cost savings mechanism for most cities. So if you could jump forward for me, please, to we'll just go forward a couple slides. There you go. This slide here. Back one, please. There you go. So what we've done for the city of Chattahoochee Hills, we put together a fleet program using our data and our infrastructure to understand how to operate the fleet somewhat differently. This is some information for you. And again, this is us just taking the fleet list that we have that was provided and making sense of what we're looking at. So a couple things to point out is we have about 24 vehicles in fleet. We've removed some of your heavier duty vehicles. We do not work with fire trucks and we do not work with ambulances as well, just to be clear there. So again, about 24 vehicles in fleet. On average, your fleet is just under 8 years old. Not terrible for what I see out there, a little bit older than what we would recommend from an enterprise standpoint. Your average miles, 14,000 miles a year. And on average, the city buys about 2.2 vehicles a year. So if you have a fleet of 24 vehicles and you buy approximately 2 vehicles a year as replacements, 2 goes into 24, essentially 12 times, right? So what your hold period is for your fleet, or whenever you buy a new vehicle as a city, you're set up to hold that vehicle for approximately 12 years. Your actual number right now, because of a 2.2, is right at 11 years. So any vehicle the city would put into play this year in 2024, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be run till a minimum of 2035. That's your current operating model as it stands today. Next slide, please. So this is hard to read. Do we have hard copies at all anywhere?
These
two slides
and the next slide are in your.
Perfect. This is the bread and butter, the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of the program. So what this slide here is enterprise beginning to create a plan. The previous slide was just stating the obvious, what we know: fleet size, hold period, mileage patterns, things such as that. This slide here is us creating a plan, right? So being that you have 24 vehicles in fleet, we are not proposing that we come in, partner with you all. We remove 24 vehicles and put 24 new vehicles into play. That's not what we're saying. What we do recommend is that we draw a line in the sand, right, and begin replacing older aged vehicles and slowly implement this program over a period of time. So the criteria is on the top right corner of this slide here, as you can see. So what we would recommend for year 1 of the program, or 2024, is that we replace any vehicle 10 years old or older, or over 100,000 miles. Okay. And that's to get the program going. Now, in the middle there, under 2024, you can see the vehicles identified that fall into that category: over 10 years old, over 100,000 miles, current on their odometer. And we have it broken down by which vehicles they are by vehicle class. Okay. So that's the program. And then each year, if you look in that top right hand corner, again, it says year 24, and then it goes on each year of the program. 25, we replace vehicles 8 years old or older. In year 2026, we replace vehicles 6 years old and older. And we would get progressively more aggressive until we're running the fleet at the optimal, what we call hold period. Okay. And again, that's based upon each vehicle would have its own useful life or own hold period. Okay. So next slide, please. So this is the actual financial impact of the plan, right? The previous slide was explaining what the criteria are for initiating the program, what we would replace, say, year 1 of the program or 2024, and then so on. There's a lot going on here. So I'll walk you through just a couple lines that I want you to pay attention to. The top is just a key or a legend. if you will, right? It's just sort of regurgitating some of the information we've already spoken about. What I want you to look at is that gold line. Do you see the gold line or yellow line there? That's essentially what the city is doing year in, year out currently. This is what we would refer to as the Chattahoochee Hills Fleet Plan as it stands. So we've taken data historically going back over the years. I got hard numbers from your finance department regarding your maintenance spend and fuel spend. And so when we are looking at, again, I talked earlier about the impact of running a fleet too long on maintenance and fuel. When you combine what you're spending on vehicles each year, so 2.2 vehicles a year on average, that equates to, you see that purchase amount, $109,000 on the gold line. When you add that to your maintenance spend, which is accurate numbers from previous or last year, I believe fiscal year 23, is that correct? When you add that to your maintenance number of $89,000 spent last year for the city, add those two to your fuel spend of $72,000, you get what we're referring to as your fleet budget. You could also just call it your fleet spend. But this essentially, and this could ebb and flow, but last year you were spent right around $271,000 as a city on your fleet. All right. And again, I'm not going to take you through all these lines for the sake of your time, and I want to be quiet here in a second and allow you to ask questions. But I just want to talk about the first year of the program in 2024. So if you can see on the far left there, the gold line is average. That's again what you all are doing as a city, essentially year in, year out. 2024 is year one of the program under enterprise. So what we're proposing is fleet size stays the same, 24. This is just me going from left to right here. Take your annual needs, instead of replacing 2.2 vehicles a year and purchasing them, we say acquire them from enterprise fleet management and acquire them on our open-end equity lease structure. Right. So now you go from 24 owned vehicles down to 10. And your least amount spent for the year would be $157,000. You have equity coming back in from us selling the 14 older aged vehicles. Of course, if we sell 14 of your 24 oldest vehicles in fleet, we're going to make a significant impact on your maintenance spend. So your maintenance spend would go from about $90,000 down to $48,000 year one. We would also, by increasing the fuel economy of the vehicles and reducing the fuel, we reduce the fuel spend. And so now if you add the lease payments, subtract out the equity from reselling aged vehicles, add back in your maintenance and fuel spends updated on our program, your new fleet spend would be $190,000 compared to your traditional year in, year out, $271,000. So again, by replacing 14 vehicles year one of the program, we would save the city $81,500 almost dollars. And then as a 10, and you can see it just goes on. The next year we replace 3 vehicles and 4. It'll ebb and flow. Again, each vehicle having its own life story, so to speak. But over a 10-year period of time, we would save the city $265,000. Not a ton of money over 10 years, but the program realistically is designed to update and help the city acquire a new fleet. It's not designed as a saving mechanism, but the savings happens to be a byproduct of the efficiency of this program. But we would take this, and if you go back to the key of the legend at the top there, again, your current cycle is 10.91 years old. On the right is the proposed enterprise fleet plan, or proposed cycle of 3.3 years as an average. Some vehicles being replaced every 2 to 3 years, some vehicles being replaced 5 or 6 years, depending on what they are. So that essentially is there's a lot of details that go into the program itself. There's maintenance programs, there's the way we track and control fuel. There's our ability to resell. But for right now, I guess that there's the impact of the plan, and there's our enterprise recommendation. Any questions around it I can answer for us?
Just a comment. So the punchline of all of this is that we get basically a $250,000 drop to the bottom line as we sell out of the other vehicles. And then it's basically about the same as what we're spending right now, except we have much newer vehicles. And there's a lot of benefits to that on all sorts of levels. When we had the machinery business, we had at one point owned about 24-foot rider size trucks. And we did a fleet deal with Hertz Penske, and it saved us a ton of money on that. I get it. It's not really leasing the way that we've been used to thinking about leasing, right? This is a fleet management program, but it makes a lot of sense to me.
How many miles do they get
Great
on a vehicle before you want it?
Great question. So these leases are not what most folks understand of a lease, which is a closed-end lease,
Mhm.
right? Maybe a $70,000 BMW that you pay down to 40,000 over 3 years, where a dealer will limit you to 12,000 miles a year, maybe. You turn that vehicle in at the end and they get you for wear and tear and over mileage, right? That's a traditional lease called a closed-end lease, a net lease, or a walkaway lease, all terms for the same thing. This is not that. We are not recommending that to you all, nor do we recommend that to our thousands of construction trade companies, a lot of partners, a lot of which, work in rock quarries and do most of their work off-road, right?
I'm
So
saying, is there a limit to the, so you're basically saying after 3.3 years, we're gonna start replacing vehicles, whether or not it's got 60 on it or 110. So we don't have to worry about mileage.
you don't have to worry about mileage, right? There's no
Okay.
restrictions on the program itself. We're going to create the term or set the term
Okay.
based upon the replacement vehicle's history. So in other words, a vehicle number 17 in your fleet averages 25,000 miles a year, and we think you should replace that vehicle at 100,000, then the replacement vehicle, we're going to set up on a 4-year term to hit that 100,000 mile mark at 4 years.
So those numbers can move.
They absolutely
I
can
don't
move.
see our cars getting really worn down. And my other concern would be the amount of money that it costs to transfer, especially all the police equipment in the car. That seems like a dead expense for us.
That's actually built into the program.
Okay, so that is built.
That's all part of the,
Okay.
the outfitting and stuff is included in the price of the leasing.
There's two
That's good
things,
then. I'm good.
there's three big things we pick up. One is that you're already doing this, and so the upfitting and all that happens much more quickly because you're doing it at such a huge scale. 2, purchase costs are lower because you're buying 2 million vehicles a year. 3, sales prices are higher because you've got fleet sales going out the other end, right? So like all 3 of those things are things that we can't do as a little city.
Correct. And the reality is that the resale capability is probably our biggest value add here. Again, that's why, and again, this is a cultural shift for sure for the city. What I said earlier, most cities run these vehicles till the wheels fall off, tape them on, keep running them. And I'm going to recommend the city gets out of these vehicles much earlier than a lot of folks might suggest we do normally, right? Oh, we used to run in that truck for 10 years. We may tell you 4 years, but we're going to capture the resale market. That money coming back in or the cash in is going to offset a ton the cash out scenario that you're paying for the vehicles themselves. But again, this is how we operate our own fleet. This is proved out by probably 300 plus government customers in the state of Georgia. We have approximately 3,000 government customers across the country and 11,000 overall. This is the same plan as a commercial account, only you all have the benefit or luxury of not having a tax implication, which impacts our commercial customers. And you're also able to buy and leverage the state contract the same as you were previously. So.
Okay.
And another thing that with the cost, and correct me if I'm wrong, we don't pay anything until the car is delivered. And when it's delivered, it's turnkey ready, whether it's a police car, one of the fire admin vehicles, or one of Daryl's trucks. It comes outfitted, ready, tagged, titled, outfitted, everything. So when they deliver it to the city, it's ready to go.
Because right now we have to buy them, send them out for upfitting.
Correct.
Right.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that being said, we're not dictating anything to the city, right? What vehicle we operate, I am in no position to tell Chief Tagu what vehicle to operate for his officers out there. He's going to tell us what vehicle he needs or wants. If he's in a sedan, we set the model up to replace it with a sedan. But if he wants to change it out to an SUV, we can do so per his request. We did estimate $15,000 in upfit. I think your average upfit for police vehicles is around 10,000. So we've overestimated a little bit on the upfit here just for the sake of being cautious. We're very conservative as an organization. And so we aim to use this as a model and a roadmap for the next multiple years. There's some cities that have been with us for 9 years plus on this program and have been looking at and hold us to account each year of this program from a expense standpoint. So, what did Ray project for year 4, year 5, year 6? They're looking at that, pulling this up every year and seeing if they're following the map, right, then this should be the end result here and a positive cash flow.
Also let them know that you guys will continually talk with us.
Yeah, great. Yes, so we have an account team that'll be assigned to the city as well. And in the account team, this isn't like a dealership scenario where vehicle, you drive off the lot, it's gone and call us when you need us. We're assisting managing the fleet itself, right? So we have access to your data as a city. You have access to the data as a city as well. We're tracking mileage patterns. We're looking at excessive repairs on maintenance, and we're actually providing oversight and protection from a maintenance standpoint as well. So if a vehicle goes into a shop, let's say it's a police vehicle, goes into the shop, it's one of your age units that we haven't replaced yet, So it's not under our protection in that regard or under any kind of warranty. And the vehicle needs repair, that repair will be funneled through enterprise and our mechanics would handle the negotiations there. So that's part of how you're able to leverage our infrastructure and our size and buying power. Yeah, so, and then once we negotiate the repair, essentially we approve it, we would funnel that to you all for final approval, if that makes sense.
Anybody got any questions, concerns?
I mean, what's the term of this? Is it open-ended? And can you speak to whether, I mean, obviously this has worked for a number of municipalities. Can you give an example? And I'm not suggesting, I'm not trying to undermine or anything, but just what if this doesn't work out or it doesn't meet expectations? How do we get on another track?
Sure. There's the clause within our agreements themselves from a government standpoint that allows you to exit out of this program at any time you want. There's no long-term contract locking you in. So in other words, we're telling you to replace 14 vehicles year one. If we slowly implement this and we get 3 up front, then 2 in a couple months, and you say, well, we don't like what's going on here, you can just not acquire any more vehicles from us. You can take those vehicles you did acquire, keep them on the current payment structure until you've paid them down to 0, own them outright, or you could do a lump sum cash payment and get out of those vehicles at that time. In other words, we have to earn your business every day. And so that's the proof is really in the pudding of the program. To your point, you know, there's a lot of partners out there. I know that you all vetted us quite diligently. And there's a lot of city managers, police chiefs that will back this program itself. And obviously, as you all know, the way it works with GMA and things like that, there's forums out there where folks speak about us. If you do wrong by one city, that word spreads like wildfire. And with the amount of partners we have, we aim to make sure we're taking care of all of our city partners. In terms of the open end, it is open end. You know, so we set a vehicle up for a 5-year term, and Chief here says, you know what, this is my favorite vehicle I've ever had. It's not going anywhere. Then it doesn't go anywhere. Right. We're consultants essentially recommending how to operate this fleet, but at any given time, the city has the ultimate power and says yes or no to every vehicle. We don't want a transactional relationship. We want a good partnership, but we do have to operate this fleet transactionally. So at any given point, you can say, yes, we're doing that. No, we're not doing that. My only thought process is the more you follow the actual roadmap or the plan, the more likely we are to have this outcome financially. As you deviate or vary from the program, right, you're going to impact it potentially negatively or positively if you want to make a positive move. But so anyway, that makes sense. The power is yours, you know, and you can get out of the program at any time, and the open-end equity leases allow you to dictate term. Yep. Your account team that meets with you 4 times a year will do a look back meeting and say, here's a summary of the costs. Here's what Ray projected. You know, where was Ray accurate? And number one, that's important. And then we'll also do a meeting to plan the upcoming model year. We'll meet with the department heads and go through. A lot of times they'll make a wish list where maybe they're in a regular cab, 4x2 pickup trucks, and they want to go crew cab 4x2. I'll input that into a model here and then present it to you all as a team so you can see what the financial impact of that would be and approve or disapprove that. So most cities or counties use us as part of the budgetary process as well, right? What dollars would we like to have? Or they say, here's what dollars you have allotted for the year to use, make this program work within these dollars. So this is not, again, not a luxury, not a scenario where we're asking for more money. We're just asking you to spend money a little bit differently than you have in the past, putting more into vehicles and less into maintenance and fuel, really. Other questions?
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Next is the CDAP thing, Chris.
So Chris has put the application together. I'll just give you a little background. This is about the Campbellton Historic Crossroads. That land was annexed into the city in 2015. In 2021, the city adopted a Historic Campbellton Crossroads Framework Plan that was part of a CDAP program, the same program we're applying to this year. It's administered by ARC. In that one, we had a grant with money that we matched and contracted with a planning company. It was Pond that produced the framework plan. In that plan, there were a few catalytic projects, things that we can do to start to get it off the ground. That's what we're hoping to do here. Going back to ARC, requesting approval for another CDAP award. This one would not be, if we understand the way that they are thinking of taking it, not be where they give us money to hire somebody, but we rather work through ARC and some of their partners. They have organizations they partner with to work on producing some code, zoning code that could implement the plan. The executive summary is in your packet. Executive summary of the existing framework plan, along with some of the implementation stuff at the back that mentions coding being part of that implementation process. Also, we included some pages from the comp plan about historic crossroads, and also showing that the writing the code for Campbellton has been on our community work program, which is what we're expected to be making some progress on with our comp plans every 5 years. So it's all been documented. It's been imagined for quite some time, and this is an opportunity to get it done.
Excuse me. This, just to expand on what Mike was talking about, this is a joint venture between the city of Chattahoochee Hills and the cities of South Fulton. The purpose of this is to create a unified regulating document that addresses both zoning, land use, scale, form, and design. So we have a more cohesive and unified development structure between the two municipalities.
And to be clear, right, this is Campbellton that we're talking about.
Yes.
Again, for new folks, we had done this whole exercise up in Campbellton.
The Atlantic Regional Commission utilizes Sizemore Group as their consultant, very qualified planning and design company. And we anticipate that the value of this project will be around $75,000. The contribution of the two cities totals a matter of $5,000. We have not heard anything to the contrary to that. And that is split in a formula of, I believe, around 60% to 40% ratio, roughly. And this is for the Campbellton zoning code and design guidelines.
So one of these things that's been an ongoing conversation at the Atlanta Regional Commission is that they help us in LCIs with grants to do this kind of, community-based planning thing. Here's a visioning session, all of that. Here's this beautiful thing you can build. And then they never help you actually write the code that makes that thing possible to implement, right? And that's something that, again, it's a long story, but I've been pushing for that for 15 years at the Atlanta Regional Commission. And they're starting to change the way that they're doing this program so that they're actually following through with implementation, and that's what this would be. So that visioning plan that we did for Campbellton that the council adopted now 3 years ago or whatever, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. This would be the thing that gives us the design guidelines and the rezoning maps and all the things that we need to do to actually implement that. And it's topical because, for example, the gas station thing that was up there, they're coming around again, talking about what to do. And again, all we've got is the old code. We don't have anything better to say, well, now you have to meet this better code for Campbellton, right? This would help us get to that. Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Again, this is just the authorization to make the application for that.
Did they ever get a curb cut there?
The next one is public comment thing, and that's there've been some confusion, I guess, over what exactly our rules are. And they have changed at times, basically because we haven't had something written down. This was a way to try to fix that by writing down what our actual policies are for public comment in the two places that we have it. We have open comment, we have public comment and public hearings. So I asked Rick to put something together based on that, and that's what this is. Just to clarify, again, how it works each time we're doing it.
Right, and also to make it consistent between planning commission and council.
Did anybody have any questions about what was in there?
During the meeting, will you make a statement, Rick, about what substantively, if anything, is different so that the public has a
I think what I'll do, I think what might make sense, Scott, is to kind of just summarize each one of the points real quickly, not read it, but sure. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. And then the next one is a change to the T-Splosh budget. Robbie, is that you?
see. Got 13 minutes. Maybe not 13. All right, let me turn to my page. For T-Splosh, we're gonna only talk about, even though you got a very detailed memo, mayor and council on the T-Splosh, because I like to be able to keep it all together, talking about T-Splosh, both T-Splosh phase 1 and phase 2. This change order is phase 2. Phase 2 is Rico Road. And is anybody driven down Rico Road on the south side of the parkway recently? It needs some repairs. So when we did the bid for it, we were gonna make those repairs. And then after the bid, we awarded it to Piedmont Paving. And they came back and we're doing quantities, what we need to do to repair it and such. And they said, well, this is gonna need a lot more work. It's gonna need a full depth reclamation, what we call FDR. So we said, okay, well, we need to get a bid on that. We need to do a change order for it. So they came in just to make repairs. It was about $400,000. And we budgeted around $2.8 to $3 million for our T-Splosh projects, using both T-Splosh, 1.5 from T-Splosh and 1.5 from the reserves. So we can spend $3 million on the project, all the projects. So this one came in at 400 and we were already at 1.2 for phase 1. So we're still way under. I said, okay, well, we budgeted $3 million. So they went back and came back to us and they have a bid now. It's 1.79. But go all the way back to my fiscal impact. So we would spend an additional 1.769 instead of the 391,000 to get Rico Road from Southfield Parkway down to Hutchinson Ferry Road to take care of what we anticipated to begin with to spend. So that's what we're here today for, is a change order on the T-Splosh, which is going to be the phase 2.
That's the difference between just topping and doing the FDR.
Doing the FDR.
Yeah.
And we've done that twice in the city. We've done on Atlanta Noonan Road. We've done on Wilkerson Mill Road where we had to do a full depth reclamation. And this is about 4 miles of road. Atlanta Noonan was about 1.5 miles. And it was about $600,000. Of course, this was several years ago. And Wilkerson Mill Road's 2 miles. And it was less, about $500,000 because it didn't need as much quantity materials and such, but this is 4 miles of road that needs full depth reclamation that we're going to do. So, but the good news is this is what when we initially talked about this and we budgeted for it last year, we said, hey, we expect to spend $2.8 million. Let's put aside 1.5 from our reserves and let's budget 100% of our T-Splosh that we collect, which is what we're doing, and we'll be at 3 million. Now there's a 5% for professional management. That's a requirement for engineering services and such. So that's going to be on top of that, but we're still going to be within what we budget for. So I'm not surprised by it. I just said I need a change order because you already awarded $391,000 of Piedmont Paving. Well, they can't go forward and do 1.79 million. Because this is the change. It's a big change. So that's why we're here today. Instead of doing a rebid, they already bid on it. They were the lowest bid, the most responsive bidder, and we felt it was most appropriate for them to give another opportunity, and they did. This is what we expected.
This is in part just the reality of the history of our roads. A lot of these were gravel roads that were paved by Fulton County at the time, and they weren't putting a whole lot of money into fixing the subgrade and all of that. You can see, Rico Road's subsiding all over the place. So they're having to go back and really rebuild that one. We're gonna have that same issue on some of our other roads. And it's also in part just a reflection of the fact that we have not had enough money to keep them topped. And, you get to this point where it starts falling apart faster. And this will be front and center in our whole budgeting conversation. One of the things too is we had planned to do some surfacing work on Hutchinson Ferry, and it's gotten worse since they didn't get it done last fall over the winter. And we're having to look again at whether what we were planning on doing is even going to work there now.
Yeah.
And so this is one of those things, there's not much choice to it. It's just where we are. And hopefully
we pushed really hard to get this bid because I got it at the 11th hour, got the agenda report put together, got it to Dana so it could be on this agenda because I wanted it before March. I wanted it now. I could have waited till April, but again, that's just going to push it further. These paving companies, they're ready to go now. Here we go. It's March.
First on the
It's getting ready time. Look, it's coming up. We got spring back into action because spring's here. So we got to set our clocks back because we're springing back into action. So that's right around the corner.
Robbie, are we first on their
I
list?
always do that for
Are we
grades.
first on their list since we got skipped?
We
last
will
year?
be first because they're ready to go. They're ready to with this. That's why I want to do it March, not April. Because we got to spring back into life. I do that for Greg.
Rob, I think this is great. But one thing I would like for you to look at, not now, is the Crossroads subdivision, paving those roads, because it has not been done since we became a city of Chattahoochee as well. And I know, I'm just.
We
saying
talked
state of
about
one.
that and we're in our budget discussions, in our pre-retreat discussions. The mayor and I talked about that very topic.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, so that's it for the agenda. Anything else?
So.
If not, let's take 10 before we start the council
Take
meeting.
10.
Thanks.
Section 10.
6:15, 5:52.
Move everything to the right, to the left, to the left, to the right.